thanks everyone for having me here. I'm super honored, and thanks for Ed for inviting me to talk today. I'm a San Francisco-based artist, and I met Ed actually in Amsterdam when we were doing an academic paper out there at a conference, and so I had the pleasure of meeting him. Was this about 2.5 years ago? Yeah. And so I'm really thrilled to have to meet you here in Seattle. It's funny, my father's name is Scott Kildall, and he's a very famous computer pioneer of the 70s and 80s. He's on Wikipedia as well, has his own page. He's no longer with us, but he's a graduate of the University of Washington in the PhD program and was in the first graduating class of computer science here at the university. So it's actually a real thrill to be here at this university. And being a child of the 70s and 80s, I grew up literally among these crazy computer machines, and no other kids were around this kind of stuff. And to me, these kinds of machines, we laugh at them now, were this sense of home and a wonderful feeling just to be around them. And I couldn't even find a picture of the right machine online, but this is very close to what I had. This was in my bedroom, something like this, and it was called the Plato machine. And it was a network computer of 30,000 different terminals that you would access via modem, and they were networked to other Plato machines all over the world, and mostly in the United States. Kind of a pre-internet of sorts, and this was in 1982. And so I spent all this time on this machine, and no one at the time knew anything about this. So I was the only one that had access to this thing that I knew about. So I had to log in, a password, and you could email, and you could IM with people, you could play online games, you could go to chat rooms. And it was during this time I got completely immersed in this virtual space of what a computer world was. And I had my first internet romance at the age of 12 in 1982. And I had a girlfriend in Texas who was actually a real girl that was 13. And we exchanged pictures and letters, and it wasn't some old 40-year-old man. Either that or something really creepy. But she and I would have this intimate relationship. It was pre-sexual. It was kind of this adolescent relationship where we share feelings and talk about things that we were going through, our parents, what have you. And it was during this time that I had this sort of odd formative experience of being in this virtual world that I didn't share with anyone else. We didn't talk about it because there was no one else I knew that was going through any of these things. I just had this odd mapping. And I think a lot of us might come back to images like this when we think about virtuality and the imagination. This is the Magic Lantern show in the late 19th century, where people were literally projecting images from a machine, a device, into a real space. And they would do lectures like this one we're doing now, where people would be talking like sort of a pre-PowerPoint slideshow. And you would have audiences just enraptured by the fact that you could have images from a device being projected into reality. No one had ever seen anything like this before. And a lot of my artwork comes back to this idea, a cinematic idea of projecting imaginary things into real spaces in various ways. This project is called No Matter. It's a collaboration I did in 2008 with my partner, Victoria Scott. And we looked at the concept of what I call imaginary objects. And these are objects that have never physically been built, and they exist only in a shared cultural mind. There are objects that you see in mythology, like the Holy Grail, the wings of Icarus, objects from fiction, like the Maltese Falcon, the Yellow Submarine, impossible objects.
I had a toy Yellow Submarine when I was a child.
So Mr. Schenken had a toy Yellow Submarine. Did you have a time machine? No. Didn't think so. So there are also impossible objects like the time machine, the flying saucer, the hypercube, which is a fourth dimensional cube projected into a three-dimensional space, so it's an impossible object, at least in our reality. Schrodinger's cat, a series of thought experiments like Schrodinger's cat or the tree that fell in the forest, the old Zen riddle, and doesn't make a sound, or does it? And we took all these imaginary objects and made this giant list of all the possible ones we could think of over months and months of brainstorming, and came up with what we thought was a list of 40 ideal imaginary objects. We thought the best place to build imaginary objects would be in an imaginary space, such as Second Life, which is, as many of you know, Second Life is a virtual world, super popular from about 2007 through 2009. It still exists, but it's a little bit less of a big thing now. And the interesting thing about Second Life is the shared space in which people generate all the content for that space. So someone built the fields here, built the house, built the tree, the clouds. This wasn't built by the company Linden Lab that owns Second Life. This is a virtual Manhattan. So you have someone who built the bridge, or people who built the bridge, the buildings, all the stuff that you see here. These spaces are shared. They're often depopulated. There's not a lot of people running around in them. So you go there, it's kind of like this empty sort of apocalyptic landscape, post-apocalyptic landscape. People have avatars in Second Life. They often look like younger, sexier versions of themselves. And Second Life is this interesting virtual public space. You can move through most of the spaces freely and interact with strangers and all over the world. You don't really know their real identities. Generally, people don't divulge their names. And so we worked with the building community in Second Life to create these imaginary objects. This is the imaginary object showroom. That's the hypercube over there. Let's see if this laser pointer works. Yeah, there's the hypercube. And behind there, behind me, that's my avatar, the purple guy, is the brain in the vat, another imaginary object. If you've ever seen old science fiction movies. This is the time machine. This is the model of the missing link, the skull of the missing link. And what we did is we then brought these 3D objects in Second Life into real life through a digital backdoor at the time. And now there is a little bit of a way in Second Life to do this, but at the time there was no way to bring 3D data from Second Life into real life. And so we found essentially kind of a hacky sort of backdoor way to pull out the 3D data, and we remapped textures onto them and built them out as two-dimensional foldable paper sculptures. This is an unfolded version. They're high-quality prints, high-resolution prints printed at a professional print house. And this is what one of the sculptures looks like. This one's about this big, 2 feet by 1 foot by 1 foot. This is the portable hole. So it's kind of like a Stargate. You walk in one side and you end up somewhere else, teleport you. This is the aforementioned model of Schrodinger's cat. Well, this is one of the more complex models. And so Victoria and I spent hours and hours and hours cutting and folding and gluing these imaginary objects together. And it just took so long. This is the yellow submarine, kind of like your childhood yellow submarine. And this is the can of worms, which is how we felt after we had started this project. It just took much longer than we thought. But these are just such beautiful objects. And we ended up showing these at a number of venues. And the last one we showed them at was the San Jose Museum of Art. You can see here some of the various imaginary objects. This is the perpetual motion machine, the magic potion, the Holy Grail, the ray gun, the red herring, the missing link again, the Pandora's jar, Maltese falcon, Trojan horse, portable hole, pot of gold, paper tiger, the 7 League boots from the German fairy tale, magic carpet, can of worms, rosebud, the sled from Citizen Kane, and kryptonite. We also had exhibits in Second Life. So this is a Second Life exhibit where we had our opening with other avatars, and all these objects were interactive. So you could get on the submarine and it would take you underneath the floorboards of the museum, or you could pop in the portable hole and it teleport you to 2 different places. And I found that Second Life was, somewhat of a limited social venue. I wasn't super, even though I was into virtuality when I was a 13-year-old kid and being in the terminal. In real life as an adult, I prefer going outside and meeting actual people. But I found the artistic possibilities of Second Life to be completely fascinating. And one of the projects I've been involved with from 2006, and we still do performances in Second Life to the present, is a group called Second Front. And we're a series of avatars, real people from Italy, London, New York, Halifax, Chicago, and we have one in Vancouver, and myself in San Francisco. So my avatar here is the guy with the wings, the purple guy. BB's in New York. She used to live in LA, but good call. And we're a sort of virtual Fluxus group who, I think one of our members, Patrick Lichty, calls it the theater of the absurd. I think of it as more of a place for uncertainty and online performance. So as doing regular performance art or theatrical performance, you have cues, you have some control over the environment. But when you're online doing performance, there's a lot of technical problems like network glitches. We would crash the Second Life servers pretty often with all the antics that we did. We also just have all these interlopers who come into the space and be part of the performance. So we had to be very flexible about the terms under which we would perform. And that made it really difficult at first until I learned just to roll with the punches and go with it. This is a performance called Martyr Sauce. And we looked at, in Second Life, they have these sims where you can go and shoot at each other with weapons. which is kind of ridiculous in Second Life, because Second Life you don't have gold or hit points or armor, you just have characters, and so when you get killed in Second Life, you just get teleported back to your home, like a home base, and then you can just teleport back to that sim, but you don't lose anything. And so this is, to me, this was kind of like reincarnation, and it opened up the possibilities for performance. So we staged a hippie protest, sort of a peace protest with bodhisattva characters and peace signs with about 7 or 8 of us. We had virtual spliffs and virtual acid, so we offered the violent members in the group to peace out with us. They were not so happy with this kind of performance, and these characters here with chainsaws and machetes wanted to come and kill us. We even got a death threat in real life, which I thought was kind of funny that you would extend the virtual performance into like a real life death threat over some silly intervention from their standpoint. Another project we did was 28 Avatars Later, in which we looked at, in Second Life you have this odd thing where people want to make these like younger looking avatars of themselves. And I always thought it was kind of silly, like if you can make anything you want, why make an avatar that looks like yourself? Why not make something really crazy and weird? And so we played around with notions of the body by creating these zombie-like skins that you could wear and making a zombie performance out of this. And this is my character here, this guy wearing zombie clothes, and all of us started out as zombies and wanted to create a mobile Second Life intervention. So the idea was that this was 28 Avatars Later, Fluxus style. So you go to a site or a place and you find an uninfected person, you give them a zombie package, and then you run around the site for about 5 minutes trying to convert people to zombies, and then you go on to the next location. In the zombie package is a note card which says you've been infected and invites you into a second front performance to join with us. It has a zombie skin that you can wear, and it'll transform your skin. And a zombie bear is like a teddy bear that you hold, and when you hold it, it makes you groan and spew blood and try to bite people. Within about 30 minutes, we had a horde of 70 zombies running through Second Life. And this is New Paris here with some zombie characters in it. This is a nightclub here. You can see that this person, this blonde person over in the back, it doesn't look very happy about zombies in their nightclub. And some of these avatars were amazing in that they had IM'd me later on saying this is the most fun they've ever had in Second Life. They never thought that you could do something so fun and creative in that space. They'd been used to going to these nightclubs and dancing and chatting with people, and they didn't realize about the performative possibilities. So it made me really happy to involve other non-art avatars in our performances. This is the third one I'll talk about, the last one I'll talk about, called Grand Theft Avatar. And we presented this at a panel called From Cinema to Machinima in San Francisco. And this is presented by Christiane Paul, who's a very prominent new media curator. And she had we had several other artists on the panel, including some prominent ones in San Francisco. Camille Utterback, Scott Snibbe, and Lynn Hirschman were among the folks on the panel. And she asked me if I wanted to do a second performance. So I was there live, like I am now, doing a live second front performance with my other second front members in the virtual space. So people were seeing on the screen what my avatar would see, like sort of my avatar's projection. So they were following my avatar through the space. So it became a little bit challenging because I had to both talk and perform live and sort of capture this whole performance. And what we decided to do was to do a bank robbery in Second Life. And we posited that Linden Lab had too much money in Second Life, and we needed to break into their treasury and steal their money and free it. And so as part of it, and I'll show you the video in just a minute, we put on disguises of some of the other, because if you do a bank robbery, you need to have a disguise. We put on disguises that were the other members of the panel. So you'll see someone being transformed into Camille Utterback, myself being transformed into Scott Snibbe, and Patrick Lichty being transformed into Christiane Paul. I'll go ahead and play the video now.
So you had to. This is the real Linden Labs treasury.
Well, this is a fake Linden Lab treasury, and because of course virtual money isn't really held in money vaults. Although, so we constructed this fake set and put our characters inside there. Half of our members were inside the fake treasury. Although afterwards, people asked me completely seriously, and I know you're not asking me seriously, did you really take money from Linden Labs? And we're like, what do you think? They hold it in like virtual money bags in a vault?
Blanca, come say any code. 9740 active, squawk 1036.
So for those of you that catch the reference, that's Slim Pickens, and reference to Slim Pickens from Dr. Strangelove when he writes the H-bomb down and creates the end of the world. And we had a little bit of trepidation about having Christiane Paul, the new media curator, writing the H-bomb down to the, destroy the whole world. So I was a little bit like, oh, I hope she doesn't, hate me for doing this. But she had this big smile on her face afterwards and had a really good sense of humor about it. And all those costumes, we make this, a lot of those costumes, those skins we custom make, but a lot of those things that we buy on Second Life, the helicopters, the H-bomb, like with Slim Pickens, is actually an animation and a device that someone made in that community. So I bought it for like $1 and made this animation. You can blow up a sim somewhere. So we typically go out to the Second Life store and buy all these props and then end up making a few things. And Patrick Lichty did the construction of the bank itself, and then I wrote all the programming for the GUI scripts that spread all the money everywhere, for example. So one of the things about working in Second Life that really transformed my own work, and I'm not showing a lot of my earlier work up till this point, before graduate school and right after graduate school, I was making a lot of sculpture and video, a lot more traditional artwork, and doing a lot of electromechanical work. But I started opening up the practice once I started working with Second Front, because I realized that you can just change a performance context completely and work in an entirely different venue, and that changes the work and how others perceive it. It was at this point, somewhere along the second front performance trajectory, that I started conceiving of a project called Wikipedia Art with my colleague Nathaniel Stern. Nathaniel Stern is a professor of digital arts in Milwaukee. And this was our first collaboration. Oh, and we've had 2 collaborations. And Wikipedia Art is an art intervention, or was an art intervention, into Wikipedia. It began as a page called Wikipedia Art, and it being on Wikipedia was a page that anyone could edit. We posted it on Wikipedia on February 14th, 2009. There's a few aspects about it. I won't go over the whole page, but one of them is that that is interesting to the project is, let me find it here, is the pointing to the invisible authors and authorities behind Wikipedia. So this was our intention, was to make, expose this invisible layer of Wikipedia, because the way that Wikipedia articles get written is very mysterious. And I had written Wikipedia articles for artists that had gotten deleted, spent all this time doing it, properly cited them, and was kind of wondering where this bias came from. We also looked at the transformation that happens when you start citing a work. And so with Wikipedia articles, for something to be included on Wikipedia, the threshold for inclusion is verifiability, not truth. So something merely needs to be written about by a mainstream media source, and then it can be legitimized by Wikipedia. This creates an odd feedback loop, and this is central to why Wikipedia Art was a successful project. Wikipedia often gets cited by, it cites mainstream media articles, but often mainstream press will cite Wikipedia, so there's no actual reference. You end up getting this feedback loop. So to make Wikipedia Art a successful project, we decided to have, we worked with several people, and they crafted articles about Wikipedia Art before it existed. And they were posted on blogs that were notable sources for Wikipedia at the same time that we posted the Wikipedia Art page. We then cited those articles on the Wikipedia Art page that we had just posted, creating this feedback loop of performative citations. Back to the original text, one of the things that we asked people to do, and we sent many emails right after the original intervention, to then invited them to write about Wikipedia Art, because anything written about Wikipedia Art is a citation that becomes part of the project itself. This, of course, the Wikipedia community was not so crazy about this project, because it was, first of all, kind of confusing for them. Also, they thought it was a clear violation of Wikipedia rules, although they couldn't figure out which ones. It created this huge multi-page deletion debate that went on for hours and hours, keep, delete, until finally it was deleted summarily by a 17-year-old admin on Wikipedia named Werdna. Who knows? And what we did with that deletion debate is we posted that deletion debate as the artwork that was Wikipedia Art back onto new media forums and other new media journals, and those then got covered in turn slowly by more and more notable press. Here you see it in PBS, and there's the Telegraph in Amsterdam. It took a strange turn about 6 weeks afterwards. We got, I got a letter from the Wikimedia Foundation that was alleging that the Wikipedia Art project violated the trademark of Wikimedia, and they wanted our domain name, wikipediaart.org. This essentially was where the project lived. Once the project got deleted from Wikipedia, we kept all the archives and the conversation on wikipediaart.org. And this was a strange case indeed, and we talked to many lawyers and many people. We eventually started working with a lawyer in DC, a pro bono lawyer in DC, and he and many others were fairly certain that Wikipedia Art was a fair use of trademark. It was a non-commercial project, it was done in good faith, and it was a critique of Wikipedia. We eventually got, after several rounds of negotiations with their lawyers, we weren't getting anywhere, and we eventually got a blog posting on our behalf by the Electronic Frontier Foundation. That in turn spawned a number of articles, including one at Slashdot, and once it went on Slashdot, it was all over the place. So at that point, Wikipedia Art, despite its odd beginnings, became actually a notable project. The Wikimedia lawyers slowly backed down by not really pursuing any action against us. They never said anything about it, they just backed away slowly. Not before Jimmy Wales himself called us trolls by name, dedicated to vandalizing Wikipedia as a publicity stunt. So the legal conflict And all that conversation about Wikipedia art became part of the project that was Wikipedia art. It then became something that was cited and written about. And since then, Wikipedia art has been written about by a number of real mainstream sources like the Wall Street Journal and many others. Right. So in the Wikipedia art project, it's changed my relationship completely. And I come from a programming background, and I work as a programmer at the Exploratorium right now. A new media exhibit developer. And one of the things I began wanting to do is thinking about algorithms as personalities in my own work. One of the projects, it's a smaller project I'll talk about, is Playing Duchamp in 2010. This followed up the Wikipedia project. Marcel Duchamp, as we know, is considered one of the forefathers of, if not the forefather of, conceptual art. But he's often, his real passion in life was playing chess and not making art. He wrote about this all the time. And he actually was represented the French national chess team in the 1920s, 1930s, and was an incredibly good chess player. He wasn't a grandmaster, but he was a master, and he was so good that he abandoned art making for a number of years. And so I wanted to honor his legacy, both as a conceptual artist, because what better way to pay homage to the forefather of conceptual art by letting him beat you at chess, by creating an online chess game that played chess like Marcel Duchamp. So I reprogrammed an existing chess engine and licensed out software and gathered money to produce this project. And this is more or less what you can do. You can go to playingduchamp.com and you can still play Duchamp. And to this day, every day I get 2 or 3 people who play Marcel Duchamp in chess, and I get the games back in my email. So it's still an active game. These chess pieces are modeled after his original hand-carved wood chess pieces. So this comes back to my sculptural origins, where I worked with a 3D modeler to recreate these pieces and insert them into the chess game. Marcel Duchamp was also a bit of a performer of his own right, and this is one of his performances, a famous one, where he played chess against a nude woman in a gallery museum. And so I had to sort of honor that by playing chess against a prominent San Francisco curator at an exhibition. I beat him. So one of the aspects about coming back to this idea of imagining the virtual and bringing virtual objects into real space is this project I did a couple of years ago at the San Francisco dump. And this is a residency they have. It's amazing. It's a 4-month residency, and they have 2 artists at a time, and they give them a fantastic studio on the grounds of the dump. You don't live there, but you go there every day. And as an artist, you can go into the public disposal area. This is where people go with their station wagons and trucks and dump their stuff they don't want. And you can go through and scavenge through those materials. And you can't go through like municipal garbage, like household waste and things like that, nor would you want to. And from those materials, you build art. And everything that you make for the final show has to come from the dump. You can't bring in any outside screws or nails or wood or paint. Everything has to come there. And you're like, oh, that's not too bad. But it turns out like it comes back to this problem of like, what are you going to make when you don't know what you're going to make? When you don't know what you're going to have? Like you have to come up with these general parameters. And the idea I came up with was to play a role of a prospector from the year 2049 who was mining the landfill for precious resources. And from those precious resources, I'd build imaginary devices to help the prospector live. I also decided, coming from an art and tech background of making electronic things and dealing with motors and constant programming that takes months and months and months of time, the technology doesn't have to actually work. It's an imaginary device after all. One of them I made is called the Sniffer, which is a scent-based resource detector. And you can see here on the bottom is a rubber dental head that I found. That was a real good find. A weed whacker that I inverted and spray painted to look like a movie prop, and there are a lot of those in the dump. And also this is a packaged medical device that was like a breathing tube hooked up that you could hook up to a tank of some sort. And I put those all together as my first invention. Each of these inventions was accompanied by a blueprint, and this was a piece of wood that I found in the dump, and I painted it with latex paint that I found there. And it's about 24 inches by 18 inches. And they contain imaginary and real symbols, but as a completely made up sort of blueprint. Like these things don't actually exist. And some of these symbols, like this little pitchfork here, are completely made up, whereas some of these other ones, like these are HVAC symbols, some of these are electrical symbols, and so on. And this is me performing with the sniffer, and I made a series of performance videos with each of the imaginary devices. This is the universal mailbox. And in the universal mailbox, you can send a note to any person at any time, at any place. So the person can be you from when you're 10 years old. It can be you in the future. It can be lottery numbers. It can be to Marie Antoinette. It can be to some sort of future explorer. It could be any place, anytime, anywhere. And so people would write notes in the exhibit and drop them in the mailbox. And this is the blueprint for the mailbox. And so these were all laser etched. And so you could use modern tools to make things at the dump, but you had to use the materials to make them with had to be from the dump themselves. It took me forever to find the right paint for these too. This is the 2049 hotline. And with the 2049 hotline, you could talk to an emissary from the future. And so this is a device, and during the exhibit, this is outside the sort of parking area or the kind of closed off exhibit area at the dump. At the end of the residency period, you have a show at the dump. And so you could go by and pick up the phone line, and on the other end would be someone from the year 2049, which is actually a series of people, my friends, my mother-in-law was one. And you could pick up the phone and talk to them, and they would tell you what the year 2049 was. And so my instructions to the people on the other end were stay on for an hour. Everyone had an hour-long slot. You're from the year 2049. You can make up the future however you want, but you can't break character. You can't pretend like you're not from 2049. And so people would walk by and go, oh, what's on the phone? And they'd pick it up, and suddenly there'd be a voice on the other end. All of these objects went to a show called Regeneration in New York earlier at the end of last year, beginning of this year. And it was a giant exhibition about sustainability and artwork, and it had 10 different artists. I was selected to be included on that. And so as a kind of culmination of that project, I made one called, an exhibit or a piece called Imagine 2049, which is a time capsule to be sent to the year 2049. So that's me in the prospector outfit, bearing the time capsule this January. And so what I did is I asked people to make an invention to send to the year 2049 to help the future be a better place. So oftentimes, like when you hear about the future, we think of it as either like this techno, wondrous kind of singularity, everyone's going to be happy and healthy and young forever, or we think of it as this apocalyptic climate change problem where the world's going to be desiccated and we don't really know what's going to happen. But I wanted to think of a positive way for people to imagine the future transformed. So I asked them to describe or draw an invention. They put it inside the universal mailbox. And then at the end of the exhibit, I collected all the inventions that were submitted. And there was about 1,500, 2,000, there were so many of them. And they were done by kids and adults and what have you. Most of them were terrible, like they were literally scribbles or just garbage, graffiti on the notepads. And a lot of them were repeats. Like we had tons of flying cars, like 120 flying cars, so I only kept 2 or 3 of those. And I put them all into baggies, all the good ones, which came out to be about 200 of them, and put them inside a time capsule that I had modified, a stainless steel container like this, and stacked them in there, and then buried them. And these are what some of the inventions look like. I had this funny exchange with one of the curators there, and I'm like, I better take pictures of all the inventions before I bury the time capsule. And she said, well, you can just take them home, you can just take a picture of them afterwards. No, you don't understand. I'm burying the time capsule with the inventions inside them, so I won't be able to take pictures of them. And we're like, oh yeah, of course. So it changes your notions of documentation. This is a machine that automatically sorts garbage. So this is close to my heart with the work with Recology. This is one that I'm sure that parents would love, right? A robot that would help you or your kids get dressed in the morning. And some really bizarre ones, like a llama duplicator. There's some exponential llamas. And I also had online forums. So this is the ones that were typewritten or ones that were submitted online. And one of my friends submitted this idea for inflatable sleep capsules. So when you're getting really tired in the middle of the day, and then you want to take a nap and you go on. Another one that we had was the smell recorder. So this is a really cool one. It's like you could record smells in a room or in a kitchen, and then you could play them back like in the future. And this is the plaque that I got engraved. And if you ever want to get cheap engravings, go to a pet place that does pet cemetery markers. It took me a while to figure this out, but I wanted to find like a marker that was really cheap because I'm running under a budget. So making them out of bronze is hugely crazy expensive. And then it turns out that pet gravestones are a giant industry. So I found this guy in South Dakota that did this for like $40. And this was one of the exercises in future thinking. So back to this slide here. So, I mean, every time I see this, like, we probably all kind of snicker and laugh at, these crazy big computers. But I wonder also, like, at what point will we snicker and laugh at this kind of scene where you have people in laptops and cafes with laptops? And at what point in the future will we look at laptops and be like, oh my God, I can't believe we carried laptops in our backpacks. That's kind of crazy. It makes me think about what kind of technology in our present is going to be, how it's going to be embedded in our future in different ways. And we don't really know the answer to that. One of the projects that I embarked on more recently is another collaboration with Nathaniel Stern called Tweets in Space that talks about this future thinking and potentiality. We wanted to do another project with social media, this time with Twitter, and we were looking at a way to transmit tweets to a nearby exoplanet that might support human-like biological life. Our target planet is GJ667cc, which is about 22 light years away. This is one that was found by the Kepler mission, so this has a high index of habitability, it turns out. And it has, according to all accounts, the ideal conditions to support alien life. We think. We presented this at Isaiah last year as part of a 30-minute performance. So this was in that 30-minute period, you could tweet with the hashtag tweetsinspace. And all those tweets we captured in this back-end server software that we wrote, essentially a Twitter bucket that would capture everything, and we would repackage those and send those off into deep space. And this, like Wikipedia Art, was a worldwide performance which repurposed social media. But rather than be an intervention or critique on the media, it was more of a celebration of Twitter. The folks at Twitter were actually really excited about this project and helped promote it in small ways. It got even more press than Wikipedia Art. I think the press loves the fact that some crazy artists were going to tweet aliens. And the most helpful press was the one that we got the day before the performance. We were super nervous about doing a performance like this. Like, what happened if we only got 40 tweets? And so once again, we're working with uncertainty and networks and not knowing what will happen. When we got this blog posting the morning before the event, I knew that it was going to be successful. We would have enough activity. And this is our countdown timer at the live event. This is about 10 minutes beforehand. People were already really excited about tweeting aliens. This is the scene in the Isaiah event room. And this was one of the few situations where we told people they can use their cell phones. And go ahead and tweet. We also had kiosks where people could go and type in tweets if they didn't have a cell phone. This is the dual screen projection software that I wrote. And what you see here is, satellite dishes that would go back and forth. And they would pick up these tweets that were being stacked up from buildings. There's 4 different buildings that would grab the tweets live and stack them up. And then they would beam them to these spaceships that would then hold the tweets here and then sort of drift off into space with them. So it was really fun to write animation software like that. And the audience loved it. And I hope we can do something with that in the future. We gathered about 1,500 tweets in 30 minutes, so it comes out to about a tweet a second. And the transmission date for this was November 28th of 2012. We worked with an outfit in Florida that had a satellite dish that we could rent some time on. And they were able to align the satellite dish to hit the target planet so that the tweets will arrive there in 22 years at the right time. And the reason why we had to wait for 2 months was that it wasn't until that time that the planet was going to come into, I guess, the right alignment for the satellite dish in Florida. Some of the tweets were kind of what you'd expect, like, "Hi, aliens, come and visit us." This is a good one. I love everyone in the universe, and from Pakistan, so from all over the world we got tweets. In many different languages as well. So we got some in Mandarin, Chinese. We have a lot of tweets in Portuguese for some reason, Japanese, Korean, Spanish, many languages, but mostly Westerners. People were curious about what extraterrestrials might look like. A lot of people were asking, like, please don't eat us, or don't make us into meat. That was a very common theme. There's also popular cultural references. And the one that surprised me, the only one that really surprised me, was the number of people that apologized for the poor behavior of human beings. So there was a large percentage of people that were saying, like, humans aren't so bad. Like, we do a lot of bad things, but we're actually a really kind, generous species, but give us another chance. I'm going to take a little bit of a 180-degree turn here, because this is what I did about a year and a half ago. I started looking at sustainability in the arts, and this is a conversation that we were having yesterday. As an artist and making all this work is fantastic, but it doesn't sustain itself very well, as you can imagine. The Marcel Duchamp Plain Duchamp project, for example, was a solo commission that I did with the help of Turbulence.org, an organization out in Boston, and a little bit more help from another organization called Terminal. And from the two, I cobbled together about $5,000. This is my expense sheet. And most of the money went to paying others to do some of the work, like a graphic designer, web designer, a back-end programmer. I did the front-end programming. I did all the project management. I did a lot of work on this project, but I needed the help of others. The total artist fees when I was done with everything was a little bit over $700. When I broke down my time, it was kind of a telling, sort of depressive, hourly rate of $4.96 an hour, which is far less than minimum wage. For those of us who've gotten grants before, this is actually like a good situation when you can end up paying yourself at all. So faced with this problem of sustainability in the arts, and also looking at other ways to open up the art practice, I took a job at the Exploratorium where I work now. It's a fixed term position, meaning that it ends after a fixed amount of time. This one ends at the end of the year, so I have another 3 weeks left here, and I've been there for about a year and a half. The Exploratorium, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, was founded by Frank Oppenheimer. He's the brother of Robert Oppenheimer, who is one of the chief architects of the atom bomb. And Frank did a little bit of work on that project as well. And Frank Oppenheimer was a science instructor and a teacher, and looked at the way people learned, and primarily worked with high school kids and younger kids, and found out that his studies of the way science museums and institutions worked before this time was that they would have displays and vitrines in glass and text kind of describing the scientific phenomena behind these. And so this runs contrary to the way that people learn. Like, kids learn from a hands-on experience. They learn from actually touching things and grabbing things. For anyone who has ever worked with kids or adults, they learn through physical interaction. And so why are kids having problems with these institutions? Well, that's not the way they learn. So he created the Exploratorium in 1969, and it was a museum dedicated to awareness with 3 precepts in mind. A museum dedicated to science, perception, and art. And we just opened up a space on Pier 15 in San Francisco. We moved from an older space, which is more of a warehouse space. This is right on the water, and they have 600 exhibits, and most of them are interactive in some way or another, or somehow have electromechanical principles that pull people right in. One of the exhibits that's my favorite one there, it's been around for a number of years, is called the Monochromatic Room. And it's a little bit hard to see because of the lighting in here, but what this is you walk in and the regular white light is removed, and instead you have kind of this light that only shows sepia tones, so there's no color in the room. And you walk in there and you feel like you're in this old 19th century photograph. Hanging from the ceiling are flashlights on tethers, on string, on rope. And people can look at objects that have color, like these jelly beans here, and suddenly you realize that, wow, these have color. And it feels like you're in this odd, imaginary, weird space. And what this is showing is that there's a whole set of invisible phenomena that you don't realize until you actually interact with it. The invisible phenomena in this case being that the properties of color are due to light and perception, and not an inherent part of like an object. And what we're kind of think about, objects, we think the objects contain the color, but we don't, and we know from science texts they don't. But once we interact with something like this, it becomes like ka-ching, dialed right in there. And this idea of making the invisible visible ties back into my own interest of working with making virtual objects into real objects, with the difference being that you're working with virtuality versus an invisible scientific principle. The unique thing about the Exploratorium, one of the unique things, is that they have their own fully functional machine shop with a metalworking studio, woodworking studio, also lathes and milling machines. So all the exhibits there are made by the Exploratorium staff. In most science institutions, like if you go to the Pacific Science Center or other places like that, they have what's called a design build process. So they make exhibits through designing them on 3D models and conceptual sketches. They come up with exactly what the exhibit is supposed to do. Then they outsource them for fabrication. Then the exhibits are brought in and plopped down. And if they work, that's great for the visitor. If they don't work, then, well, that's the way it is. And so what we have here at the Exploratorium is an extensive visitor research and evaluation experience where we'll bring out a prototype of something based on an idea or some research that we've done, see what works and what doesn't work. What buttons do people press? How do they interact with the piece? Then we bring it back in the shop, rejig it, and bring it back out again. And we do this over and over again until we dial in these really beautiful, wonderful exhibits. And the Exploratorium is known for its world-class exhibits that other science institutions will often buy or emulate in various ways. It's the only one around that does this. This is one exhibit I've worked on. My job there is a new media exhibit developer, so I do work with software and electronics as part of the exhibit development team. So I work in teams of 4 or 5 people to make these exhibits happen. We all contribute to the creative process in different ways, but it's less my brainchild than a group kind of situation where we brainstorm and iterate and come up with something that works. This is a project called Tidal Memory, which displays current tide levels. And so there's 24 columns, each one kind of like a clock. Each one represents 1 hour of tidal level. And we know that tides change every day. Everyone knows that. But we don't really see it or think about it unless you're surfing or sailing or fishing. If you're just walking through the city, you don't think about these things. And so what this shows is the different tidal levels as columns of water in each column. And so people look at it and they spend some time and they watch it, and then it slowly dawns on them exactly what it is. And it's situated right near the water too. One other thing that happens at the Exploratorium recently, and this is a series of projects I've been working on, are trying to make big data, big scientific sets of data visible to the public. And so if you think about the idea of making the invisible visible, what we're doing now is making the invisible visible, but only on a larger scale. This is an image taken by NASA satellites and provided to scientists in the United States, specifically ones at MIT as part of something called the Darwin Project. And what the satellites do is they take photography from different light spectrums, and they can see electromagnetic signatures of different parts of the ocean. And they've realized that these different electromagnetic signatures tie back to different types of plankton in the ocean. And up till very recently, they've had no idea what kind of plankton lives where. They can only take small samples, but now they get this kind of global map. So the scientists at MIT have built out mathematical models as to how this works, and the Exploratorium staff, some of the creative teams, and I didn't do any of the real creative work on this project. I have worked with this table quite a bit since it's been built. This is called plankton populations, and this is one where you can take these little wooden rings and move them around this table. And the table's interactive, and these animate. And at different points in the table, it'll show you the plankton that's alive at that point in time. And there's also a calendar that just cycles through the months January through December and rotates along, and will show you the different kind of how the plankton changes over time. And so one of the kinds of things I'm grappling with now and coming to terms with this, how to take my experience at the Exploratorium, which you have a very public context for evaluating your work, whereas the new media stuff, we work with it in a more isolated context, in a context that if I try to explain this work to people who aren't art students or in galleries, it's difficult to kind of explain what's going on at times. Whereas at the Exploratorium, everything has to be 100% legible. And so I'm trying to figure out a way to make that new media art dialogue, bring it to a more legible context without diluting its meaning. And I'm not sure how to do that. One thing that is exciting is I will be an artist in residence over at Instructables, and that's where I hope to begin this process. Instructables, for those of you that aren't familiar with the website, has been around for a while. It ties into the maker community. Instructables has also recently been bought by Autodesk, so they actually have a lot more money and a much nicer website. But the idea is that you can upload how to do things, how-tos on just about anything, from cooking recipes to things like an electronic music box powered by the Arduino, to odd things like a leaf plow for a lawnmower. And they're all like these intricate how-to guides. And so some people have artwork up there, but mostly it's a bit more of an inventor makerspace. One thing they do have, though, is they're tied into the Autodesk tool chain, and they have these amazing like 3D printers and other types of fabrication facilities available for the instructable staff, but also to the artisan residents. And this is what I'm super excited about working with down the road. I don't know where this is going to go, but what I do want to do with this and what my proposal was about was working with making 3D data visualizations, working with big sets of data and making them into physical objects. And so I proposed to them making what I call data crystals. So I imagine them being these objects that transform space and time into something you can hold, but still be somewhat legible. Of course, to make this happen, I can't completely go literal on it, and I have to have a bit of a performative element. And I want to rejig or reinvent the prospector role. Instead of a prospector, the idea would be make a data miner who goes through and mines the data and somehow fish the crystals maybe out of water or use a green screen or do a performative element. So I bring the crystals out of virtual space and into real space. And that's it.